he was also dealing with the cumulative impact of racism throughout his life, right? And people don't realize these microaggressions. It's not like it happens and then it's gone and then it happens again and it's gone. It has a cumulative effect. And so he's dealing with that as well. And we talked that night. I wish I could redo that every day. I think about that. But the next day I found him. He had taken his own life. He was a victim of suicide. And, and I say it that way purposefully. I think when we say somebody committed suicide, there's a blame that I don't think is justified. So I want to be clear about that. But that was another, young Black man gone, in part due to this impact of race on his life.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor, and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black executive perspective.
We are coming to you live from my new BEP studio for another thought-provoking episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters regarding race, culture, and those uncomfortable topics people tend to avoid. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit.
And I'm your co-host, Chris P. Reed. Before we get started, we want to remind you to check out our partners at Code M Magazine, whose mission is saving the Black family by first saving the Black man. Check them out at codemmagazine, 2Ms.com.
Definitely check them out. And today, and we all know this, as white supremacy resurges across politics and public discourse, today, Dr. JoJo McManus joins BEP for a bold conversation on what real resistance looks like in 2025. Drawing from his book, A Brother's Insight, Dr. JoJo calls on listeners to move beyond performative allyship and take daily courageous action against oppression. From losing his brother Casey to confronting anti-DEI backlash, he will discuss the weaponization of ignorance and share a path forward grounded in truth, accountability, and bold leadership, especially from white allies.
Before we go too far down that path, let me introduce our posthumous guest. So Dr. JoJo McManus is an award-winning author, speaker, and executive advisor on anti-racism and inclusive excellence. He consults, writes, and speaks widely on topics at the intersection of anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, right? And leadership development as well. His latest book, A Brother's Insight, offers guidance on living an impactful anti-racist life. Dr. JoJo is a proud alumnus of Florida A&M University, where he earned his PhD in educational leadership. Dr. JoJo McManus, welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So let me ask you this. Is this something before you get the certification or degree from Florida A&M? I got a guy at AT&T who's a finance leader, Kevin Crawford. Shout out to Kevin Crawford. Constantly will remind you he's a rattler. Constantly will. And I'm like, man, is this commission based? So what is it about you guys?
There's no commission, unfortunately.
Okay. All right.
It's
cool.
just something about FAMU, and they produce graduates that love the institution and want to continue to help the world understand how impactful and powerful FAMU is.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
So, do me a favor. Tell us a little bit about where you currently are, and then we'll obviously, do some background and things like that to get to know you a little better. But where you currently reside, tell us a little bit about your family.
All right. So I'm in Southern California right now.
Okay.
I live here with my daughter, who's 15. Hard to believe. I know it's cliche, but it goes so fast.
Yes,
It does, buddy.
I was just watching one of y'all's old podcasts that had about biracial kids.
Yeah.
And one of them named Michaela. My daughter's Michaela.
Yeah.
And I think, and that was good, seeing that podcast and listening to those brilliant young men and women, because my daughter goes through a lot of that, and she comes out of it with very strong opinions, including that me and her mom do not understand her experience completely, because hers is different, right?
That's right.
So we live here in Southern California, and Mackie is finishing up her freshman year in high school, and I'm trying to handle that.
Buddy, my daughters they'll be 18 and 17 in a couple of weeks. They're a year and 6 days apart, June 21st, June 27th.
Mm-hmm.
And Michaela, that was my daughter.
Oh, okay.
On the podcast, right? And that was her friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you caught it or not, but I was kind of floored by hearing the things that they deal with, right? And even when she talked about her, having an American doll, and when she thought, I don't see anybody that looked like me, she never said anything to us. So it was eye opening, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it's a podcast that a lot of biracial families need to have their kids watch, and they need to watch themselves, because our kids are seeing the world, sometimes similar to us, but also they see it from a different standpoint as well.
Sure. And kudos to you as a dad. Your daughter and her friends seem like they're doing well and clearly have a good head on their shoulders. I'm trying to do the same. I've been blessed that my daughter is not one to hold back. So I've heard it for many years about what's going on, what her thoughts are. In fact, we may talk about this later, but she's really the person that encouraged me to do more and to write this book.
Buddy, I love it. So we have a lot of similarities. The other thing that we have similarities in is, and look, let's be fair though, we're not even, we should put your coat on, right? Because of what you're doing from an anti-racism standpoint. You wrote a fantastic book that I enjoyed. I haven't finished it yet, but it's so on point. You're in high demand, my brother. You're on podcasts, you're being interviewed all over the place. You're doing a lot of great work, and you're on many of platforms. So the question Chris and I have for you today, why did you want to come on a Black Executive Perspective podcast to talk about today's topic?
Well, two reasons. One, a friend of mine who has her own podcast, particularly on race, Sima Lieberman, recommended it. And I've been pretty careful about where I go and which things I get on. So I checked out a number of your past podcasts. And I really appreciate y'all's perspectives. So it's as simple as that. I just wanted to be a part of y'all's conversation.
Well, look, buddy, thank you for that. And you ready to talk about it, my brother?
I'm ready.
All right, let's talk about it.
So when we talk about, the origin or the making of a disruptor. So at this point in the world, you're seen as a disruptor, whether you like it or not, right? And I tend to believe that every superhero has an origin story. So I would like for you, and this may be something you never heard before, so brace yourself. Tell me how great a kid you were that soon after you were born, your parents decided to adopt a whole nother son. You know what I mean? Because your mom, to me, you come from a long line of disruptors, obviously. That
no
is
doubt.
That's right.
So give me some of that. Where was that? Obviously, you can't remember a time without your brother, but give me a little bit about how great it was or how great you were that it inspired them to say, let's do this immediately again and let's go against the grain.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was my greatness that made them do that. In fact, when I was born,
we got to create another one.
Right. My parents, when I was born, said I looked so bad that they were concerned that something was wrong because I had jaundice, and I guess the way I came out, my head was real long, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, is this kid okay?" So maybe they thought, right. Let's try again. But yeah, they decided to adopt my brother Casey. Just because that was something going on at the time. There were people adopting other kids, and it was something they felt was something they could do because they had, enough to try to help. And they didn't have any particular type of kid in mind. They just said, we want to adopt a child. And then they went and, did all the paperwork, did all that process. It was a little less, complicated back then. Mm-hmm. And, the story goes that when they went to the adoption agency and they were supposed to just, figure out who's their kid, and they're standing in a room with all these children. The woman asked her, my parents, what type of child do you want to adopt? And, they responded that they wanted to adopt a child that maybe wouldn't get adopted otherwise.
It's time to rethink your protein. AgileLab's protein bars are crafted with high-quality protein, double the leucine, and enriched branched-chain amino acids, essential for optimal muscle recovery. Finally, a protein bar that works as hard as you do. So visit agilelabs.com and use the code BEP to get 20% off. That's agilelabs.com, promo code BEP.
And the adoption agent response was something along the lines of nobody wants the end slurs, right? And after getting, chewed out by my mom, another disruptor, no doubt, they were brought into another room where there were a number of kids of color. And the way my mom tells it is she saw Casey and she was done. That was her child, and he was only 11 months younger than me. So you're right. I don't remember any time in my life before, Casey was my brother. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say I also have another brother, BJ.
Of course. Yeah.
Who is a few years younger than Casey. He's still mad at me because we didn't put a picture of all three of us on the cover of the book.
Siblings, hey, that comes with the territory.
I'm never gonna live that down, but I did say nice things about him in the book. So
you did.
Let me say this though, so therefore we don't miss the mark here. And not only was that somewhat disruptive, but where were you in the country that made this that much more disruptive at that time? Right?
Yeah. So, and you already know, we were in Boston. Exactly. That's where the adoption agency was. We
in the 70s.
Right. This was 1971. Right. So we lived in a white flight town south of Boston. Okay. My mom was from Roxbury and Dorchester. So those people that know Boston will know what that is. Okay. This is the neighborhood where Malcolm X was when he lived in Boston. Okay. And it was Black and Jewish primarily. My mom's Jewish. And this became an issue later on, but her father was very much racist. And they would move as soon as Black folks moved into their block, they would move. So they moved a number of times. They lived all over Blue Hill Avenue. So for the Boston folks, you'll know what that is. But yeah, that was a time and a place where this was not fully accepted, clearly.
Yeah, buddy. So based on that, my friend, and you write about in the book, your mother and your father were, different than a lot of the people, a lot of your neighbors and stuff to that nature, right? So, and look what you're doing today, right? So how did your parents influence your awareness of racism, anti-Semitism, and classism growing up? Because let's be fair here, you're living in an area that's predominantly white, right? And a lot of things are coming at you and your family, and more importantly, your brother Casey. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, like everyone, my parents made decisions that impacted how I grew up, right? And that impacts who you grow up to be in a lot of ways. So the adoption of my brother and where we lived, we grew up in the back of a liquor store, which in Massachusetts is called a package store. And so we grew up in the back of the packy, and you can hear my Boston accent slipping out a little bit, right? We lived in the back of the packy, and so that was our community. And that the packy was right between the white flight neighborhood with all these white folks from Boston and Cape Verdean neighborhood, which were folks that were immigrants from the islands of Cape Verde, off the coast of Africa. A large number of Puerto Rican folks. And so we were right in the middle. Everybody drinks. So that's where everybody met. And this was our community. These are the people we saw every day. The front of the store was just, to us, part of the apartment, right? We were always in and out. There of where we lived and also, who we were as a family, were based on decisions my parents made. And for them, they weren't, activists. They weren't out in the street and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think I ever heard my parents say the word anti-racism or talk about that in that particular way. But they would teach us about what's right and wrong and, being there for family and all of that kind of stuff. And, I think that it became an issue in our family because of the experiences that Casey and I and my little brother BJ had over time. And, my family had this thing. We're working class, blue collar folks, and you're only really allowed to complain about something one time, right? After that, I don't care if you're 5. All right, what are you going to do about this? Because I'm tired of hearing about it. And so that sort of, I think, is what, sort of planted the seeds for me. I want to do something about what I saw as the most problematic thing that we had to deal with.
How is that feeling though, my brother? So I got two questions with you, right? For you. Number one, you have a brother that is 11 months older than you. Am I correct? 11 months older? Or
Younger.
Younger.
I was born
11 months
70.
younger.
Yeah.
He the big
Yeah,
brother.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
He
you're the
big
big brother.
Yeah.
And so you're 11 months, let's be fair. You maybe just starting to walk. He comes in, and then now you and him are hanging everywhere, right? How did you, when you saw your brother, and then look, you 1, 2, 3 years old, so I don't know, but when you looked at him, it's like, this my brother, or it was just automatic, he was a McManus, and that's all that mattered. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, when you're one, you're not even really talking, so
Right.
there was no conversation about it. Here's your brother. Okay. And so over time you start to see things that are different, but it's really from an outside perspective that you start to think it's something different, right?
Right.
Didn't make any difference to me. BJ looks nothing like me either, right? He's got blonde hair and blue eyes, and so he looks like dad's side, which is Irish Catholic. I look like mom's side, which is Jewish. And, and Casey and I used to talk about, wondering what his birth parents looked like to see who he looked like. Right. And, so it was never an abnormal thing to us. Right.
Got it.
It wasn't until school started that
Exactly.
other people told us this was different. And more than just different, is problematic. Right.
What inspired you to write the book, A Brother's Insight Now?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to the little one, to Michaela. So, when the video and all of the attention about the murder of George Floyd came out, my daughter was like 9, right? And 9 or 10, something like that. And she is hearing from people, both two sides of this that don't make sense together, right? And she came to me and she said, I want to know what happened. Tell me what's really happening with this. What's really going on? And I said, well, there's a video of exactly what happened. And it was taken by a young lady who's not much older than you, right? So I said, it'd be really hard to watch, but I'll sit with you and we can watch it together. And we did. And, as a dad, anybody listening who's a dad can probably relate to this. There's times that you don't know what to do with the look on your child's face and what they're going through. It's new to you. And that was what happened. There was this strained look on her face, but she was intently focused, but there was a different look. And afterward, we're trying to process, we're talking about it. And I'm trying to explain to her what's going on, why there's protests and what's happening. And she said, Dad, isn't this what you're supposed to prevent? Because she knows what I do. She's been grabbing the mic on stage and in all kinds of things. Just did it in New York last week at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity. Mackie got right up there on the panel with me, right?
That's awesome.
And closed us all out. But she's been doing that since she was little. She's taught in my classes. She's been a part of dialogue. She knows what I do. She knows what a lot of people that she knows as aunts and uncles, right? We say play aunts and play uncles where I'm from.
Right.
And so she said, isn't this what you're supposed to prevent? I said, yeah, me and Auntie Jane and T.O. and Uncle Eddie and even your mom and others. And I'm trying to go through that. She cut me off and she said, it's not working. Mm-hmm. You got to work harder. Mm-hmm. And, there was more conversation, but that stuck with me. And I'm a blue collar kid. You don't tell me I'm not working hard enough. Right? That's not a thing. Like that's almost the worst thing you can say to me. Right. And so I just thought about it. I said, there's no more hours I can put in. I've got to figure out what else I could do. And I thought about it. And one of the things that I haven't done a lot of is share my story. And I've never written a book. And I thought, maybe if I write a book, there'll be some people, particularly folks that look like me, that'll be able to relate to my story and maybe learn from some of my experiences, both personal and professional, right? And y'all have read enough of this, I think, to know that this was difficult to write.
I can.
And it was also difficult to get anybody to publish it. And I went with the traditional publisher at first, and they wanted to change too much of it. So I had to go with a hybrid. It's a long process. It took years to get this done.
Why did they want to change some of it?
They thought it was too in your face, too harsh, too controversial, and I also got a lot of, there's already plenty of books on anti-racism. And I said, there are, but we need more voices, right? There are brilliant books out there. I'm not knocking anybody else's. We should read all of them. But the reality is that if both of y'all wrote books, some people are going to relate to Chris, some are going to relate to Tony, and some will relate to me. We got to get as many voices out there as possible that people can relate to so that they can hear the message, even though our message might be very similar. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's sort of what guided me.
So Dr. Jojo, let me ask you a question. Is there, and I haven't had the opportunity to read it yet, is there a section in your book whereas you depict the first time, because I'm 2 years apart from my brother, and we were kind of locked at the hip, right? So you're 1 year apart, so you guys are going everywhere. Is there a moment in the book, or could you describe the pivotal moment where you guys couldn't go to the same place for safety reasons or for a lack of comfort or whatever the case may be, and it just was really in your face or in his face that you realize, you know what, things will never be as vanilla as they were, pun intended. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first day in school, my first day of kindergarten, I got in a fist fight. Well, the second day, I got in a fist fight on the bus. And I do talk about that in the book. But it was because people were saying things about my family, right?
Oh, okay.
About mom, about Casey. And it didn't help that my mom rode the bus with me the first day.
I like her.
Oh, I love that.
She was going to look out for me the first day. And then the second day, she was probably riding in the car behind me. I don't know.
Right.
But the second day I was on there and somebody said something. But, that's in the book. But something I don't think that we wrote was, because you mentioned the first time that we realized we couldn't go somewhere together, something like that.
Yeah.
I think that may have been when I used to go up to Boston to play basketball.
Okay.
And Boston's a very segregated city, still is today, right? And there wasn't a neighborhood where Casey, myself, and my little brother BJ could all go and not get some kind of harassment or some kind of issue. And back then, it was just going to be a fight. It wasn't as many guns.
Right.
It wasn't as dangerous as now.
A knife or somebody.
But, so we learned how to fight. My dad taught us how to fight when we were very young. In fact, he used the excuse when we got chicken pox, right? He bought us boxing gloves so we wouldn't scratch. And then he was like, well, we might as well use them. And so my little brother BJ would, ring the bell, and then Casey and I had to learn how to fight. Right. But the thing is, when we would go to Boston, we knew there was neighborhoods where, the way I looked was okay, and the way he looked wasn't, and vice versa. Never stopped us, because we weren't going to have that, right? But it was made clear as we got into school and we got older and doing different things. We were both athletes, and so we would go a lot of different places to play ball. I played basketball, he played football, Andy ran track. So we would experience those things when we would go places, yeah.
But, my friend, tell us a little bit, and I know, matter of fact, I can imagine how tough it was to write it, just reading it, and you sharing, all the things. But the moment that you found your brother, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? When he didn't get the scholarship to go to college, and he felt like, the feeling that he can't, and you guys were still trying to come up with things that he could do. I guess your parents was to buy a pizza place and something of that nature because he loved to cook. But talk a little bit about that moment and how it's fueled you today.
Yeah, so, Casey was 17 years old, getting ready to finish up high school. And, we were looking at colleges. And so back then, there was no internet. There was no Google to look, and there was no web pages for colleges. This big, giant catalog of all the different colleges. And you try to look through it and see what they decided to put in there about them. and he was trying to find a place that fit him. Play football. He wanted to become a chef, so he wanted a place with a culinary arts thing, and he found a school down south in Georgia that had all those things, and he was an extraordinary football player. So he went for a visit with my mom, and it was during the school year, so I didn't get to go. And he visited with the team. They showed him around campus. He got to watch a practice, and he's hanging out in the locker room with the fellas after. And a couple of the black football players pulled him aside and told him, he should be looking at other places because their coach was racist, the white coach that was racist. And he said, he doesn't want you at this position. My brother played middle linebacker on defense, which is like the quarterback of the defense.
Yep.
And this coach believed that white folks were smarter, and he wanted a white player in that position, even though Casey was phenomenal at it and he was recruiting him. The guys were trying to tell him, hey, look, if he finds somebody, you're going to get a letter. Right. And so he did. He got a letter. And then, and it's important to know also that, he was going through teenage stuff, right? He had issues with his girlfriend and struggling with the SATs and stuff everybody goes through. But on top of that, he was also dealing with the cumulative impact of racism throughout his life. Right. And people don't realize these microaggressions. It's not like it happens and then it's gone and then it happens again and it's gone. It has a cumulative effect. And so he's dealing with that as well. And we talked that night. I wish I could redo that every day. I think about that. But the next day I found him. He had taken his own life. He was a victim of suicide. And, and I say it that way purposefully. I think when we say somebody committed suicide, there's a blame that I don't think is justified. So I want to be clear about that. But that was another, young black man gone in part due to this impact of race on his life. Right. And, I think that's something that a lot of white folks, for some reason, can't empathize with the family members of black folks. And when you look at all these, the list is so long of black folks that have been murdered by cops or that have died in other, extrajudicial ways. I've never been able to quite understand how they can look at them and not feel something. And immediately you hear, well, what did he do? What did he do wrong? Right. Instead of watching a video and saying, that's awful what happened to that guy, and empathizing with family. And so I think that, again, the only reason I would write this down is not so that I'm going to get, the reactions that I get, which are not all positive. But it's to try to get folks that look like me to hear stories about us and be able to empathize with that and understand what that's done. It destroyed my family, right? But none of us were, and I'm still not the same. Like this happened when I was 18 years old, and I am way beyond 18 at this point, right? So it's something that I think I wanted to share so that people could empathize better.
It's a lot. And so to take that though, and obviously you said you were prodded by your daughter to, put these things pen to paper and really, did you find the experience on the back end to be cathartic at all? Did you find it to be some things that you had forgot about or repressed, or was it a self-therapy type of dynamic? And if so, how do you then align that with what you were doing? Like, to me, you had dedicated your life as a therapy almost. And so now to put it into a microcosm that is a manuscript, what was the difference there? And how did the two align?
Yeah, I think it was cathartic to some degree, although that was not the intent, of course. Right. I haven't cried as much. I'm not a big crier, but man, writing this was rough.
Well, I can imagine. Are you kidding me? Oh,
and thinking about putting it out in the world, right?
Right.
Vulnerable.
It was vulnerable.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But I kept thinking about how all of these folks that we've lost for hundreds of years, that people have died because of racism. right? From colonialism and all the way to today. People are dying because of this. And we think of it as numbers, you know? And to me, it's the loss is beyond just those numbers. And I think about how much better this book would have been if Casey wrote it, you know, as an adult. Or if Casey was telling these stories to my daughter, right? And if my daughter had cousins that were Casey's kids, you know what I mean? All that's lost, right? And, you know, and countless people who have died in this struggle against white supremacy and other forms of oppression.
Yep.
All those stories are missing, right? And I'm just trying to get folks to understand this at that level, right? And I have this picture in my mind of Casey as a grown man with Mackie on his lap. That's never going to happen. Never did happen. It's just something I wish happened. And we could, Mike Brown and Tamir Rice and all these other people that, you know, the Sandra Bland, they didn't get to have that, right? Their stories are missing too, the rest of their lives. So I want people to be able to start thinking of it differently and humanize this, right? Because that's part of racism, is to dehumanize, right?
There's no question.
So I'm trying to bring that back so that people can empathize and speak up and do something, you know?
How do you insert that into your professional advisement of CEOs and leaders, and how does the intersectionality of those thought processes weave itself into your work?
Yeah, so I mean, I've spent most of my professional career in higher education, and started out teaching, worked into curriculum development and staff, and then administration, and then I'm diversity officer and all that before I became an advisor. So I had the professional experience, but I find that particularly when it's folks that look like me, helping them to reconnect with their humanity around these issues is very important, right? Too often we get into policy, you know, and important work is, you know, trivialized into an acronym, DEI, right? And most people that are anti-DEI can't even tell you what it is, right? But helping people to bring the humanity back into this and understand not only that there are brilliant and courageous people doing this work, but the reasons that we all should be doing this work in our own ways is because of the impacts it has on people like Casey. And I think that helping leaders to connect with the humanity of all of this and think about it a little bit differently is maybe my superpower as an advisor, right?
I love it. I love it. I love it. You know, one of the things I've always learned is words paint pictures, right? And you just got finished talking about people, you know, they're anti-DEI, they don't know what it is, right? But there's a picture in their mind when they hear the word, and that's regardless of what they think it is or what somebody told it is. That's the picture that they see, and then they're against it, right? So let me ask you this. When we talk about white supremacy, a lot of times when people use that, people think Ku Klux Klan, they think hoods, they think stuff to that nature, and then they say, well, I'm not doing that. That's not me, right? And then so they turn a blind eye against stuff that they see because, you know, I'm not doing that. So can you, for the audience, how do you define white supremacy in today's context? And
Well,
then
first-
how is it? Go ahead, buddy.
I was just going to say first, you know, great, you're not a Klansman. That's, I guess that's step one, because there's a lot of them, right? The neo-Nazis and Klan, there's too many of those folks. So, okay, step
Correct.
one, you're not that great. But the non-racist, right? The person that's trying to be neutral in this. And I think, honestly, that sort of movement of being non-racist initially had a good intent, right? To be colorblind, all of that. I think the intent in the beginning was probably pretty good. But over time, we've realized that doesn't do any good. All it does is support the status quo, right? So
Exactly.
you're just watching everything happen as long as
You're
you're not,
watching it,
Right.
saying, I'm not doing that.
right. But one of the things I'm trying to get across to folks is that by sitting back and saying, hey, it's not me, I didn't do it, right? You're not helping at all, right? In fact, by doing nothing, you're allowing this to continue, right? And so in the book, I talk not only about how being non-racist is problematic, but I also talk about deal breakers, right? And what those deal breakers might be. And some of it's fun and funny. Like I talk about dating, right? And I tell a story in the book about a date that I had with a woman who was racist, and how that went real bad for her, and not great for me either, really. But just how that went, because it was an immediate deal breaker. Like if you're on your first date and this person can't help but show their racism, I'm done, right? That's a deal breaker.
Let me ask you that, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
sometimes people assume that because you look like them, that you have the same thoughts and beliefs in them, right? And I want to back up a little bit, because I do want to say this. I think by you writing this book, if I wrote it or Chris wrote it, it was just another black male writing about anti-racism, and not that it couldn't affect, but having somebody that looks like you, and your family dynamics, I would imagine, because at the end of the day, who you're talking to, you're obviously talking to everybody, but you're talking to mainstream America, right? That has the power and the ability, and I'm not even talking from a political standpoint, I'm just talking everyday folks walking the earth, to help change things, right? So that's a big deal. Okay, so talk a little bit about that, because I know that's one of the reasons that you wrote the book, obviously to tell your story, but more importantly, to reach people who look like you, who are non-racist.
Well, first of all, I don't want to minimize what has been written by Black folks, right? I was influenced by Cornel West and Maya Angelou and plenty of folks that don't look like me. And I don't think it's just because my brother was Black, right?
Right.
So I don't want to minimize that at all. But again, I think that, that sometimes, particularly folks that will not listen to you simply because you're Black, would not maybe hear your story the way that they might hear mine, right? And so for me, it's a both and. It's not, I should be the one to write this instead of somebody else. It's like we've all got to write. We've all got to do this work in our own ways, so that whoever it is, for whatever reason they want to hear us, they might not hear it from me. Maybe they need a female perspective, or they need somebody who's part of the LGBT community, whatever it might be that would make them hear it. I want that written. I want that work done, right? So it needs to be, we need to take away the idea that it has to be professionals that do this work all, completely. You don't have to be a pro to do this.
Correct.
You don't have to be fully, entrenched in this work, and I think that's part of it too. Part of the message is this isn't about big grand gestures all the time. It's not about giving a speech in front of folks. It's not about being on a big podcast. It's about doing things in your everyday life, right? So I'm talking about making anti-racism and anti-oppression just a core value.
If you like what you hear and want to join us on this journey of making uncomfortable conversations comfortable, please subscribe to a Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe now to stay connected for more episodes that challenge, inspire, and lead the change.
If you genuinely value that, it's going to be a part of your decision making every day and everything you do, right? From dating to grocery shopping to your community work to, where your kid goes to school, where you work, whatever it might be. You make decisions all day, every day. Right. And if you think about it, a lot of people can relate if I talk about it as similar to faith, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have a particular religious faith, that's going to influence your decisions, right? I would think, because there's values in that. Same thing with something around issues like environmentalism, right? If you really genuinely want to have a positive impact on the planet and you care about the environment, that's going to come into play when you make decisions every day, right? And there's going to be some decisions that have nothing to do with that, and that's fine. But when it's relevant, because it's a core value of yours, it's going to be there, and you don't have to do anything. There's no checklist. It's going to just say, you know what, this is when I could make a difference on this, and I'm going to do it, right? Whether it's a conversation with your kid or your kid's teacher, whether it's, a vote in a national election, or it's your voice on a cabinet at your job or on a hiring, whatever it is, right? we've all got these circles of influence that we need to tap into.
Let me, with your permission, channel your daughter and ask you a question and challenge you. Because professionals like yourself are unable to get the powers that be to focus on the financial wins of inclusion and equity and get away from it being a morality play or a humanistic play, like you said.
Right.
I recently heard something that was astounding to me, that HBCUs, like you're a graduate of and a PhD from, produce more PhDs per capita than any place else because they don't have the aspersions of you aren't smart enough, like you said, the linebacker play. You're not able to, and they let these kids cook. They let them go. And so in the idea of you and going into the HWCU, which you can expound upon, okay, and the resentment that has to have for abolitionists like yourself, because honestly, based on the way the country is established, you messing with the church's money.
Right.
So how do you get into these spaces? How do you get it? And why aren't you able to understand and help them see the financial correlation or the absolute win of inclusivity?
Yeah. There's a lot there.
He said
man.
a lot there, bro. He went from the whole 9 yards to PhD to you messing with the church's money.
I could spend an hour just talking about the HWCU and the HBCUs, right? And you know I want to talk about FAMU. I can stay right there, right?
That was good.
But let me tell you this. One of the things is I went to HWCUs first, right?
Okay. Expound upon that just for
exactly.
Everybody
Explain that.
Historically white colleges or universities.
Correct.
Right. You know, because I'm using HBCU, the historically black colleges and universities, as the model, right?
Right.
So usually they'll talk about PWIs, predominantly white institutions, like it just happened that way. No, there's a historic component to this. This was exclusively white.
Right.
And then
on purpose.
Just like HBCU was an alternative and had a mission.
That was it.
It was
exactly.
different on purpose, right?
On purpose.
And so when I went to FAMU, it was actually, kind of happenstance. I'd already gotten into a couple of other institutions, was ready to go, pick which one. And I was visiting a couple of friends. So one of my closest friends since high school, Darif Jameson, who is now a professor, and who teaches hip hop studies and black psychology and all of this, was doing his master's degree at FAMU, right? Okay. And then a mentor of mine, Colonel Ronald Joe, who was the commandant at the Defense Department's Equal Opportunity Management Institute, which is where I did my college internship, he was back at FAMU, right? And I knew about FAMU from him when I did my internship because he wouldn't shut up about it, right? And he had everything. If he wasn't wearing a uniform, he was wearing the FAMU uniform, right? His socks, everything was FAMU. Right. So I knew that he loved FAMU. And then my Darif was there, and I'm like, these two guys could not be more different, right? A black conservative kind of guy, from the military. And my buddy who was into hip hop and, all this kind, I'm like, these guys, they're not cool with each other. Like how they both won't shut up about this place. So I went and checked it out and I couldn't not apply, Okay. But I think that to your question about how do I get in and how do I explain the economic and financial component, is that I think there are good people that want to do better. And so that's been my entry point, right? This work does rely on allyship. It relies on people that are within the system to say, hey, we need to do better. Let's get some folks that know how, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the population of folks, these DEI professionals like myself that have committed their lives to this work and have risen in the ranks, right? We start out teaching or as activists and advocates, and we keep working our way up. And then now we have these positions called diversity officers. Right. And, these are vice presidencies and the like, around the country in universities and colleges. And they've been given the opportunity at times to make a difference. What's different, and I don't think we kind of hinted at this yet, but what's different about this field is that there is an incentive for those who do not want to see progress to hire people that are not good at this.
Correct.
Or that are willing to do nothing for a big paycheck.
Absolutely.
Right.
So unfortunately, there is some pretty bad DEI work out there. I'm not going to deny that.
Right.
And that's been used to try to characterize the work that we do, right?
Right.
The reality is that those of us that are serious about this would tell you, yeah, that's bad. But that didn't come from us, right? That's not the real work, right?
But to be fair, though, Dr. JoJo,
sure, go ahead.
there's good and bad in every profession.
Mhm.
Okay, just to be fair here,
Absolutely.
right? So nothing is perfect.
Yep.
And if you really want something to work, you perfect it.
Yes.
Okay, you find out the bad stuff and you cut it and you come up with best practices and stuff to that nature to perfect it, right? So let's stay on the DEI thing because you write this in your book, right? So why do you believe? And I want to hear your opinion. Me and Chris want to hear your thoughts. We have our own, but I love to hear your thoughts because you were in it, right? Why do you believe it's under attack? And then more importantly, is it being blown out of proportion, all right, based on what the narrative is? You just talked a little bit about, there is some bad work, but talk a little bit why it's under siege.
Well, again, there's no incentive to hire a bad doctor, right? Or a bad accountant, right? You might not be able to afford a great one, but there's no incentive in other fields because you're not trying to destroy the field. But that's where the bad stuff's happening. And there's also stuff that's, young. We're working on it and you have to improve on it. So there's been some things that we've done. It didn't work. All right, let's build and do better. Right. But the answer to your question about, what's this about and where it's coming from, it's coming from white supremacy. Right. It just is. It's not a complicated answer. It's obvious, and if you don't want to see that, then you got to do some work on yourself because it's clear.
Right.
These folks are banning books simply because they're written by authors of color, not just books about racism and the libs books. They're banning books that are about Rosa Parks, right? They're banning books written by folks of color just because it's folks of color. And again, all these other divisive things that they use to try to divide us, the LGBT issues, whatever it might be, they're banning those too and trying to create divisions. The reality of this is, and this has been going on a long time, and I do talk about this history in the book, but the reality is if we're not divided in all these different ways, we have too much power. There's just too many of us, right? If you take working class white folks, people of color, and women,
Flat out.
right? And including LGBT folks, and if you take all those groups of people, we are the vast majority. So it's not even a little bit, it's not 51%, it's the vast majority of us. And that's too much political power. So that's what these things are really about. And the DEI thing, of course, they're making up things. It's garbage. And I mean, the current administration just makes stuff up anyway about all kinds of things. But they're making up what's going on with this, and that that all these things that they're trying to say are what DEI is. It's just not factual, right? But the reality is that there are some people that look like me that want to believe it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the real thing they're tapping into is this: when a person loses a little bit of privilege, it feels like discrimination. It doesn't make it discrimination, but it feels like it. And that's what's happening is as we start to get towards equity, we're not there, right? We're nowhere near it. But as we start to get to it, some people are losing privileges because they're men and they're not getting as much male privilege, because they're white and they're not getting as much white privilege, right? Whatever it might be. Some of those privileges are going away. Those are unearned privileges.
Yeah, who's to say that you're supposed to have every job? All right. So, but go ahead, finish your thought.
But when you spend your life being escorted to the front of the line all the time,
yes, they would say history. Yes. They would say precedent.
And then you show up and you got to get in the back like everybody else. That feels wrong. That feels like, hey, what's up? Something's wrong. And they're giving an answer to that. Their answer is, oh, what's wrong is DEI. What's wrong is
they're giving
people
these
of color are
policies
getting all these advantages.
all this stuff.
Yeah, they got everything now, which is absolute garbage. There's no data to support anything remotely like that, but they want to hear it because they need a reason to believe that it's not them. And what I'm trying to say is that, look, if we look at the real history and we recognize that we should have solidarity across these different groups, we can have all the power in the world, right? But we have to start to build these bridges and create solidarity in order to work together to get to a different place.
One of your degrees is in psychology, and I have a master's in industrial psychology. So I understand this idea that you're going against the grain of what they're trying to accomplish, because I believe, and I want you to qualify this because you're more qualified than I, living it daily, is this a regression in our evolution as Americans to start to embrace some of these ideologies of supremacy and distinguish people and cut off these programs and attack Harvard and all this, whether it be xenophobia or whatever the case may be? Could you qualify it as us moving backwards as opposed to us evolving and blooming into a greater meritocracy? Because that's what I've been hearing, is that once we take all these edicts away, then it'll be a level playing field and we'll all be able to, get in, and it's not creating equity. It's not creating any vision of equality in my perspective. But you tell me, from being able to sneak into the rooms, what do they think is going on?
Yeah, I get found out pretty quick, but at
least he can get to the door.
Yeah,
he can get to the door. But once he opens his mouth, they're like, we got the wrong dude in here.
Like his date. It was like his date, man. Yeah. And she could have just been quiet.
I could have had a
my
doctor.
white card is taking a beating. Right. But yeah. So I think there's cycles, right? So there's certainly cycles throughout history where there's been backlash, where there's been some progress, and then there's pushback. The most obvious might be Reconstruction, right?
Right.
Reconstruction happened, and African American folks started to make real progress.
Started to
and then
prosper.
you get Jim Crow, right? And other pushback. So this is cyclical, right? But I would push back on the idea that folks have that this is a sign that we're regressing. Right? It's part of the cycle, but this is a sign that we've made actual progress, because some of this is so desperate and pathetic, right? It's the last vestiges, right? And that's why you get these dog whistles coming from politicians about we're going to kick out of the country these black and brown folks. So you go back to Haiti and Latin America, whatever. We're kicking out the people of color, and we're going to bring in some good white racist folks from South Africa. That's all dog whistle stuff to say, hey, we're gonna be white again, right? Make America white again. We're gonna bring back the greatness of white. That's all politics. It is not gonna happen, because the reality is that the demographics are changing in this country, right? And we have to be specific about this country, because again, when we talk about the majority in this country when I was a kid was white, right? But it's never been the majority on the planet. Right.
Correct.
Folks of color are the vast global majority. Right. So I don't like the majority minority thing, right? Because it's not global. But in this country, the demographics are changing, and our kids are living in a more diverse, reality than we were when we were growing up. And that's something that isn't going to change. As much as they want to kick out people of color and bring in good old fashioned white racist folks, it's not going to make much of a difference. Right? Because we're talking about tens of millions of people. That's not going to change. So the demographics are starting to creep up, and they're taking advantage of that. And that's part of how they're doing this, because white folks are seeing jobs go to more people of color. Well, there's more people of color, right? When I was growing up, 80+% of the country was white. Then Michaela's generation, right? Both of the Michaela's generation is nowhere near that. And in fact, the majority will be people of color within our lifetime.
There's no question. There's no
right?
question. There's no question.
So that demographic shift is a reality that they're flailing against, right? Because and at the same time, we're trying to bring equity, and they're seeing this loss of privilege, right? So I would say that this pushback is actually a sign that we were making some progress. And so I'm trying to help people to be a little patient, like, okay, I'm not giving up on this. If one more person tells me DEI is dead, I'm gonna lose it, right? And I don't care what we call it. You can call it a spaghetti dinner. I don't care.
Right.
But this work will continue.
Exactly.
And it has continued nonstop since the abolitionists said no, at the very beginning of all this mess when they invented race in the first place.
Let me ask you this, my friend. How could, Chris talked about how you got, you at least get in the room, right? And then they find who you are, like, oh, we made the wrong dude, right? But how could those with privilege use their sphere of influence to drive real change? What tactics should they take? What do they need to do to make things, and just in their daily life, not that they got to do a speech or whatever. What action should they take?
Well, the first thing is stop pretending you don't see it, right? Because that seems to be one thing that folks try to use. Oh, I didn't see that when it was happening, or I didn't understand. And as another white person, I can call BS on that, right? Because they see it, right? They'll choose not to do anything or to take a neutral stance, but we see it. And so I think that's literally an action. It's a first step of saying, you know what, I'm going to recognize this, and I'm not going to lie to myself or anybody else. I see it, right? Because if you're in a boardroom or on a hiring committee or in a faculty or in a team at work, whatever it might be, you do notice if there are no people of color, just like you notice if there are, right? Nobody's really colorblind on this, right? You do see it, so see it, and then engage in the dialogue. Engage in what can be done to make it better. And, sometimes, a lot of times, somebody like me says something and it gets dismissed because of what I do for a living, right? And what I've done, just as a person around these issues. So they'll dismiss me as, maybe as quickly as they might dismiss you. But if somebody who's the chief finance officer or the manager of whatever, or whoever's working in the company or at the school, whatever, says something, it's going to have an impact. And I give examples in the book of times when I've seen somebody that is not expected to speak up. When they speak up, it has a different impact, right? So I think it is imperative that we get rid of this idea that if you're just not doing awful things like burning crosses on folks' lawn, right, that you're good. Right? That's not the bar. The bar is higher than that. It has to be. Right? And so you need to, when you see something, you do something about it, whatever you're capable of. And yes, there is risk. The last chapter in the book is called Killed, Fired, Canceled. Right? Yep. Because that's what we're all afraid of, is those things happening to us. Yeah. And there is risk. But there's more risk for you driving down the street tonight after work than there is for me speaking in front of 1,000 people on anti-racism. That's a fact. It's not hyperbole, that's just true. So I think that we need to be honest with ourselves about how much risk we're actually taking and be willing to take some. And be understanding that, you know what, I don't deserve privileges that I haven't earned. And so when I lose them, I'm not going to pretend that that's discrimination so that I can get that privilege back. You don't get to be walked to the front of the line, and you need to accept that. And you need to take that responsibility for all those times you were walked to the front of the line, right? And so I think it's really just about people standing up. I'm tired of folks saying that just because they're not committing the worst of racism, that they're not to blame. I put the blame directly on those who choose not to act.
Let me ask you a question, because everyone like you, or everyone who appears to be, like you, didn't have a mom that was a Stay Ready All-Star. So you've been conditioned over time, right, you know what I'm saying, to stand up for yourself and do the uncomfortable thing, yeah, right, in moments of crisis of consciousness. Is there, besides your book, which I would recommend, obviously, is there anything else you would guide someone who would love to, that's just ignorant and just hasn't ever been faced with these things, right? Is there training wheels or any type of platforms or periodicals or anything that you would say, you know what, go to this or expose yourself? Is there a movie? Tony's a movie guy. So is there a movie that's not American History X?
Right? Hold on. You had me dying with training wheels, right? If they ain't training wheels, but they can get on.
Some people ain't ready to go all in, right?
I get it, but it's just your examples are just funny, right?
I have a way with words, man,
But no, excellent point. It's just funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm tripping off the way you put it too, but I like that. You know,
Right on.
but I think, I mean, honestly, it's if you're not blocking it, there's plenty out
Yes.
there. They can watch your podcast, right?
Okay.
That's going to help. They can read my book and 100 others and use that as an opportunity to start dialogue with people, right? Whether it's a book club, whether it's a group of parents, whether it's a colleagues at work, whatever it might be. There's no shortage of resources, right?
Right.
And you know how to figure out other stuff, right? Search for it on the internet, right? And be open to different ideas. It's not complicated. We try to make this so it's so complex. That, oh, gee, I don't know. And I get this a lot from people I work with, right? Some of these people that are in leadership positions, right? That are highly skilled, very intelligent people who become idiots the minute that we start to talk about race. Like, oh, gee, I don't know. Come on now. You were smart 5 seconds ago. What happened?
Right.
But we're trained to do that. We are trained to perform this ignorance as white folks. We're trained to say, oh, well, you know, I grew up this way. Well, you're 60. You've been deciding where you're going to live, who you're going to know, what you're going to do with your life for a lot of years now. So stop blaming your parents, right? Stop blaming where you grew up, right? You grew up and now you're a grown person. I need you to read books. I need you to look things up, read papers, meet people, be part of organizations that don't look like you. Spend time in community with people who don't look like you or don't have the same perspective as you so that you can start to progress on this issue. It's really not that complicated. We try to make it like that. Like, oh, poor white folks can't learn this. Please, right? I'm not that bright, right? I'm all right. But there's plenty of people just as smart and smarter that can figure this out just as well as I have without any problem and to act on it. I'm not falling for that excuse anymore. I'm really not. And I think that we have to, especially people like me, have to call other white folks on that and tell them, no, you're smarter than that. You do know how to do this. And we all learn differently. So it's hard to say you should read my book or Kendi's or this one. Read a book, whichever one speaks to you, right?
Start there. Yeah.
And I'm always reading. Like one of my favorite new books is called Black AF History. Phenomenal. It's funny. It's interesting. It's way more interesting than the mythology that's passed off as American history in our schools, right? So read that if you're into history. If you're into science, read a book that's got, some diversity of science. Because guess what? Everything wasn't invented in Europe. Like, start to educate yourself in whatever way works for you and just stop with the excuses. Yeah.
Buddy, I agree with you 100%. And Chris knows this. When, I worked at Xander Warner Media DirecTV, I created a forum called An Open Conversation on Race, okay, which people can come to, and it was a safe space where everybody could learn. And it wasn't no fluffy type. It was pull the Band-Aid back, talk about white supremacy, talk about all the things that people of color go through, right? And people would show up on that call. And I was doing it each week, okay? And the majority of people, Chris knows this, was white people that would be part of that call. And I would have people, I would have some people would speak up and be saying stuff or say, hey, can I present something? And then I had a lot of people on that call who wouldn't say nothing. They would just listen. Right? But then after a while, they would reach out to me on the side and say, Tony, I just want to let you know I've been coming to your call and I know I don't speak up, but I'm learning a lot. Right? And I'll be honest with you, I had respect for those individuals because guess what? They didn't say anything, but they were learning. They were coming to get a better perspective. And then I would hear about, hey, people would come to me and say, hey, man, I grew up where there was no diversity, or I grew up where my parents were racist, or you know what, to be fair, I did say things and blah, blah, blah. But because they were coming to this call each week, it changed their perspective. They didn't have to go to a seminar. They were coming and we were having conversation with people that were all different. And that's, to me, a lot of times, to your point, we make this like it's so complicated. When you see the person at the route, when you're at the store and somebody looks around and says, "Can I help you?" When there's a black person or somebody else in front of you, you just say, "Hey, they were next." You can do little bitty things. That's training wheels, in my opinion, right? Little bitty things to start becoming a part of, and to your point, seeing people as humans, right? And start in diving into that humanity, right? And treating everybody the same. If people just did that part, you start seeing that snowball roll down the mountain, which becomes the avalanche. So my brother, final thoughts. What do you want to leave the audience?
Wow, man. I want to leave the audience with this is a beginning of a conversation, right? Just like the conversations you just described were hopefully the beginnings of creating some folks that will speak up, right? Because that's a good first start. And then they felt comfortable enough to say to you, "Hey, here's who I am," whatever. And that's all good. But it doesn't do any good in the world unless they carry it with them and make decisions differently and speak up. So my final thought is that it's important. It's not just that you can make a difference. It's important that you do, right? And in whatever way works for you. But we need a lot more voices. We need to start seeing each other, like you were saying, as siblings, right? We need to start seeing each other as brothers and sisters, as parents, as children of our own human family. And until we start to do that, we're going to continue to have this gap in empathy, gap in understanding of one another. So I think we need to start seeing each other as family and go from there, you know?
I love that insight. And so we definitely want to make sure our folks check out a brother's insight. So we'll put something up on the screen and things like that, use the technology. But how can a Black Executive Perspective podcast help you?
Oh, I don't know. Keep doing what you're doing. I can keep coming back as long as you're not tired of me.
Yes, sir.
Buddy.
You know, but
Bring
but
the baby.
I think,
Yeah, bring Mackie.
Right.
don't say it if you don't mean it, because she'll show
No,
up.
Hey, no.
And just so
100%, man,
you
it starts
know,
there.
we're going to do a part 2 of, too black to be white, too white to be black. So we'd love for her to be a part of that as well.
Oh, that would be great, and she would love that. And I think the other thing is, pick up my book and pick up others and watch podcasts and do the learning that you know how to do and that you would have no barriers to if it was something else, right? Do what you need to do to learn and then take that next step. So, go ahead and do, Tony's podcast and listen and all that, but then keep going, right? We need more folks willing to speak up and stand up in whatever way works for them and whatever way is most impactful from them.
We love it, my brother. Right. And more importantly, where can people get your book?
It's pretty much everywhere. You can get it online at your favorite, online bookstore. And of course, on my website, drjojo.com, there's links to the book and to the work that I do as well.
Definitely go to drjojo.com. Pick up his book, Amazon, wherever, but definitely go to drjojo.com. You'll be able to see exactly what he does, his mission. I love your website. And then obviously you can pick up his book there too. So Dr. JoJo McManus, PhD, we're so excited that you came on the Black Executive Perspective podcast. We are fed by you today, my brother. And back to what you just got finished saying, this won't be your last. We would like you to come back a number of times. And you're going to be on one of our pull-up, speak-up roundtables coming up soon.
I'm looking forward to that.
We're looking forward to that, right? So that just shows you that, we're building a kinship and a brothership. And don't hesitate to let us know, my brother, anything that we can do. And we'll follow back up because I'd love to get Mackie on as well.
I appreciate it. And thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome, my brother. Stay right there. I think it's now time for
Tony's Tidbit.
And the tidbit today. In a world where oppression is loud and calculated, silence is complicity. So speak, not when it's convenient, but when it's necessary. Because the volume of your voice isn't measured by how many hear you. It's measured by how boldly you choose to use it. And you heard a lot of that today from Dr. JoJo McManus.
Man. Good business. So we also have another doctor in tow. We're going to have so many doctors you can't throw a stick at. But we want to make sure you tune in to Need to Know with Nasinga, a weekly conversation where Dr. Nasinga Burton talks about everything and anything that she's passionate about. You know, a Black Executive Perspective podcast gives her an opportunity to dive into timely and crucial topics that shape our community and our world. So we want to make sure that you tune in to Dr. Nasinga Burton as she discusses whatever is on her heart. And trust me, it's always a great time. You don't want to miss it.
You're absolutely right, Chris. And you don't want to miss the next Pull Up, Speak Up, our roundtable. We'll talk about the most provocative issues that's happening in the world today. You'll hear bold, unfiltered voices, sharp perspectives, real talk, and the call to action. And as we talked earlier, Dr. JoJo is going to be on that episode. So definitely dive into Pull Up, Speak Up. It's not just an episode, it's a revolution.
And then we also want to encourage you to tune in to some of our live broadcasts that we have where you can interact with us real time and put us into situations where we can answer questions and give insights and also learn from you as you learn from us. But we do all this to remind you to incorporate LESS, less. Our goal is to eliminate all forms of discrimination. And to achieve this, we're asking you to embrace less. And so the L stands for educate yourself on racial and cultural nuances. Today, I was educated on the fact that it's okay to be uncomfortable with a destination in mind. We can't always just wait until it's the best time and the perfect storm. We have to be able to step out of ourselves. And Dr. JoJo taught me today, it's okay to be uncomfortable in order to gain something.
Absolutely. And then after you learn, you have the letter E, which stands for empathy. Now, since you've learned, you now can understand more diverse perspectives because you put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
And the first S stands for share. Share your insights and enlighten others. Don't hide it, divide it. And that's what we were able to get to today.
And the final S is stop. We want you actively stopping discrimination as it walks in your path. So if Aunt Jenny or Uncle Joe says something that's inappropriate at the Sunday dinner table, you say, Auntie Jenny, Uncle Joe, we don't believe that, we don't say that, and you stop it right there. So if everyone can incorporate less, LESS, we'll build a more fair, more understanding world, and we all will see the change that we want to see because less will become more.
We want to make sure that you go and check out our previous episodes that we have in the catalog. Tune in to future episodes. This has become a wonderful tidal wave of success. And so make sure you go to our website, sign up for the newsletter, review, subscribe, rate, give comments, feedback. This is how we get the folks like Dr. JoJo on the roster. So make sure that you keep infusing us with what you have that can make this thing better. And where can they find us, Tony?
Buddy, you can find the Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us on our social channels of X, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, at a Black Exec. For our fabulous guest, our new brother from another mother, Dr. JoJo McManus, my boy down in Texas, the co-host with the most, Chris P. Reed. I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. We learned about it. We're still going to strive about it, and we're going to thrive about it. We love you, and guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.